Well, good evening. It's 6 o'clock on Wednesday, so it's time for Tales and Cocktails. And tonight we go to part 12 of Persuasion by Jane Austen, which means we're on the home stretch now, my dears. Anne Elliot, to recap, Anne Elliot is with her father and her sister Elizabeth in Bath, where her brother-in-law, Charles Hayter, and sister Mary, and Charles's parents, the Musgroves, have brought a family party. All our characters seem to be converging on Bath. So, part 12. Elizabeth was for a short time suffering a good deal. She felt that Mrs. Musgrove and all her party ought to be asked to dine with them, but she could not bear to have the difference of style, the reduction of servants, which a dinner party must betray, witnessed by those who had always been so inferior to the Elliots of Kellynch. It was a struggle against propriety and vanity, but vanity got the better, and then Elizabeth was happy again. These were her internal persuasions, old-fashioned notions, country hospitality. We do not profess to give dinners. Few people in Bath do. Lady Alicia never does. Did not even ask her own sister's family, though they were here a month. And I dare say it would be very inconvenient to Mrs. Musgrove. Put her quite out of her way. I am sure she would rather not come. She cannot feel easy with us. I will ask them all for an evening. That will be much better. That will be a novelty and a treat. They have never seen two such drawing rooms before. They will be delighted to come tomorrow evening. It shall be a regular party, small, but most elegant. And this satisfied Elizabeth. And when the invitation was given to the two present and promised for the absent, Mary was as completely satisfied. She was particularly asked to meet Mr. Elliot and to be introduced to Lady Dalrymple and Miss Carteret, who were fortunately already engaged to come, and she could not have received a more gratifying attention. Miss Elliot was to have the honor of calling on Mrs. Musgrove in the course of the morning, and Anne walked off with Charles and Mary to go and see her and Henrietta directly. Her plan of sitting with Lady Russell must give way for the present. They all three called in River Street for a couple of minutes, but Anne convinced herself that a day's delay of the intended communication could be of no consequence, and hastened henceforth to the White Hart to see again the friends and companions of the last autumn, with an eagerness of goodwill which many associations contributed to form. They found Mrs. Musgrove and her daughter within, and by themselves, and Anne had the kindest welcome from each. Henrietta was exactly in that state of recently improved views, of fresh-formed happiness, which made her full of regard and interest for everybody she had ever liked before at all, and Mrs. Musgrove's real affection for herself had been won by her usefulness when they were in distress. It was a heartiness and a warmth and a sincerity which Anne delighted in the more from the sad want of such blessings at home. She was entreated to give them as much of her time as possible, invited for every day and all day long, or rather claimed as part of the family. And in return, she naturally fell into all her wonted ways of attention and assistance, and on Charles's leaving them together, was listening to Mrs. Musgrove's history of Louisa and to Henrietta's of herself, giving opinions on business and recommendations to shops, with intervals of every help which Mary required, from altering her ribbon to settling her accounts, from finding her keys and assorting her trinkets to trying to convince her that she was not ill-used by anybody. Which Mary, well amused as she generally was in her station by a window overlooking the entrance to the pump room, could not but have her moments of imagining. A morning of thorough confusion was to be expected. A large party in an hotel ensured a quick changing, unsettled scene. 5 minutes brought a note, the next a parcel, and Anne had not been there half an hour when their dining room, spacious as it was, seemed more than half filled. A party of steady old friends was seated round Mrs. Musgrove, and Charles came back with Captains Harville and Wentworth. The appearance of the latter could not be more than the surprise of the moment. It was impossible for her to have forgotten to feel that this arrival of their common friends must soon be bringing them together again. Their last meeting had been most important in opening his feelings. She had derived from it a delightful conviction, but she feared from his looks that the same unfortunate persuasion which had hastened him away from the concert room still governed. He did not seem to want to be near enough for conversation. She tried to be calm and leave things to take their course, and tried to dwell much on this argument of rational dependence. Surely, if there be constant attachment on each side, our hearts must understand each other ere long. We are not boy and girl to be captiously irritable, misled by every moment's inadvertence, and wantonly playing with our own happiness. And yet, a few minutes afterwards, she felt as if their being in company with each other under their present circumstances could only be exposing them to inadvertencies and misconstructions of the most mischievous kind. "Anne," cried Mary, still at her window, "there is Mrs. Clay, I am sure, standing under the colonnade, and a gentleman with her. I saw them turn the corner from Bath Street just now. They seem deep in talk. Who is it? Come and tell me. Good heavens, I recollect, it is Mr. Elliot himself." "No," cried Anne quickly, "it cannot be Mr. Elliot, I assure you. He was to leave Bath at 9 this morning, and does not come back till tomorrow." As she spoke, she felt that Captain Wentworth was looking at her, the consciousness of which vexed and embarrassed her, and made her regret that she had said so much, simple as it was. Mary, resenting that she should not be supposed to know her own cousin, began talking very warmly about the family features, and protesting still more positively that it was Mr. Elliot, calling again upon Anne to come and look herself. But Anne did not mean to stir, and tried to be cool and unconcerned. Her distress returned, however, on perceiving smiles and intelligent glances pass between 2 or 3 of the lady visitors, as if they believed themselves quite in the secret. It was evident that the report concerning her had spread, and a short pause succeeded, which seemed to ensure that it would now spread farther. "Do come, Anne," cried Mary. "Come and look yourself. You will be too late if you do not make haste. They are parting. They are shaking hands. He's turning away. Not know Mr. Elliot, indeed. You seem to have forgot all about Lyme." To pacify Mary, and perhaps screen her own embarrassment, Anne did move quietly to the window. She was just in time to discern that it really was Mr. Elliot, which she had never believed, before he disappeared on one side as Mrs. Clay walked quickly off on the other, and checking the surprise which she could not but feel at such an appearance of friendly conference between 2 persons of totally opposite interests, she calmly said, "Yes, it is Mr. Elliot, certainly. He has changed his hour of going, I suppose. That is all. Or I may be mistaken. I might not attend. And walked back to her chair, recomposed, and with the comfortable hope of having acquitted herself well. The visitors took their leave, and Charles, having civilly seen them off, and then made a face at them and abused them for coming, began with, "Well, mother, I have done something for you that you will like. I have been to the theater and secured a box for tomorrow night. Ain't I a good boy? I know you love a play, and there's room for us all. It holds 9. I have engaged Captain Wentworth. Anne will not be sorry to join us, I am sure. We all like a play. Have not I done well, mother?" Mrs. Musgrove was good-humoredly beginning to express her perfect readiness for the play, if Henrietta and all the others liked it, when Mary eagerly interrupted her by exclaiming, "Good heavens, Charles, how can you think of such a thing? Take a box for tomorrow night? Have you forgot that we are engaged to Camden Place tomorrow night, and that we are most particularly asked on purpose to meet Lady Dalrymple and her daughter and Mr. Elliot, all the principal family connections, on purpose to be introduced to them? How can you be so forgetful?" "Phoo, phoo," replied Charles. "What's an evening party? Never worth remembering. Your father might have asked us to dinner, I think, if he had wanted to see us. You may do as you like. I shall go to the play." "Oh, Charles, I declare it will be too abominable if you do, when you promised to go." "No, I did not promise. I only smirked and bowed and said the word happy. There was no promise." "But you must go, Charles. It would be unpardonable to fail. We were asked on purpose to be introduced. There was always such a great connection between the Dalrymples and ourselves that nothing ever happened on either side that was not announced immediately. We are quite near relations, you know, and Mr. Elliot, too, whom you ought so particularly to be acquainted with. Every attention is due to Mr. Elliot. Consider my father's heir, the future representative of the family." "Don't talk to me about heirs and representatives," cried Charles. "I am not one of those who neglect the reigning power to bow to the rising sun. If I would not go for the sake of your father, I should think it scandalous to go for the sake of his heir. What is Mr. Elliot to me?" The careless expression was life to Anne, who saw that Captain Wentworth was all attention, looking and listening with his whole soul, and that the last words brought his inquiring eyes from Charles to herself. Charles and Mary still talked on in the same style, he half serious and half jesting, maintaining the scheme for the play, and she invariably serious, most warmly opposing it, and not omitting to make it known that, however determined to go to Camden Place herself, she should not think herself very well used if they went to the play without her. Mrs. Musgrove interposed. "We had better put it off, Charles. You had much better go back and change the box for Tuesday. It would be a pity to be divided, and we should be losing Miss Anne, too. If there is a party at her father's, and I am sure neither Henrietta nor I should care at all for the play if Miss Anne could not be with us." Anne felt truly obliged to her for such kindness, and quite as much so, moreover, for the opportunity it gave her of decidedly saying, "If it depended only on my own inclination, ma'am, the party at home, excepting on Mary's account, would not be the slightest impediment. I have no pleasure in the sort of meeting, and should be too happy to change it for a play and with you. But it had better not be attempted, perhaps." She had spoken it, but she trembled when it was done, conscious that her words were listened to, and dared not even to try to observe their effect. It was soon generally agreed that Tuesday should be the day, Charles only reserving the advantage of still teasing his wife by persisting that he would go to the play tomorrow if nobody else would. Captain Wentworth left his seat and walked to the fireplace, probably for the sake of walking away from it soon afterwards and taking a station with less barefaced design by Anne. "You have not been long enough in Bath," said he, "to enjoy the evening parties of the place." "I am not yet so much changed," cried Anne, and stopped, fearing she hardly knew what misconstruction. After waiting a few moments, he said, and as if it were the result of intimate feeling, "It is a period indeed. 8 years and a half is a period." Whether he would have proceeded farther was left to Anne's imagination to ponder over in a calmer hour. For while still hearing the sounds he had uttered, she was startled to other subjects by Henrietta, eager to make use of the present leisure for getting out, and calling on her companions to lose no time, lest somebody else should come in. They were obliged to move. Anne talked of being perfectly ready, and tried to look it, but felt that could Henrietta have known the regret and reluctance of her heart in quitting that chair, in preparing to leave the room, she would have found in all her own sensations for her cousin, in the very security of his affection, wherewithal to pity her. Their preparations, however, were stopped short. Alarming sounds were heard. Other visitors approached, and the door was thrown open for Sir Walter and Miss Elliot, whose entrance seemed to give a general chill. Anne felt an instant oppression, and wherever she looked saw symptoms of the same. The comfort, the freedom, the gaiety of the room was over, hushed into cold composure, determined silence, or insipid talk, to meet the heartless elegance of her father and sister. How mortifying to feel that it was so! Her jealous eye was satisfied in one particular. Captain Wentworth was acknowledged again by each, by Elizabeth more graciously than before. She even addressed him once, and looked at him more than once. Elizabeth was, in fact, revolving in great measure. The sequel explained it. After the waste of a few minutes in saying the proper nothings, she began to give the invitation which was to comprise all the remaining dues of the Musgroves. Tomorrow evening, to meet a few friends, no formal party. It was all said very gracefully, and the cards with which she had provided herself, the Miss Elliot at home, were laid on the table, with a courteous, comprehensive smile to all, and one smile and one card, more decidedly for Captain Wentworth. The truth was that Elizabeth had been long enough in Bath to understand the importance of a man of such an air and appearance as his. The past was nothing. The present was that Captain Wentworth would move about well in her drawing room. The card was pointedly given, and Sir Walter and Elizabeth arose and disappeared. The interruption had been short, though severe, and ease and animation returned to most of those they left, as the door shut them out, but not so to Anne. She could think only of the invitation she had with such astonishment witnessed, and of the manner in which it had been received, a manner of doubtful meaning, of surprise rather than gratification, of polite acknowledgement rather than acceptance. She knew him. She saw disdain in his eye, and could not venture to believe that he had determined to accept such an offering as atonement for all the insolence of the past. Her spirits sank. He held the card in his hand after they were gone, as if deeply considering it. "Only think of Mary's including everybody," whispered Mary. "Only think of Elizabeth's, including everybody," whispered Mary very audibly. "I do not wonder Captain Wentworth is delighted. You see, he cannot put it out of his hand." Anne caught his eye, saw his cheeks glow, and his mouth form itself into a momentary expression of contempt, and turned away, that she might neither see nor hear more to vex her. The party separated. The gentlemen had their own pursuits, the ladies proceeded on their own business, and they met no more while Anne belonged to them. She was earnestly begged to return and dine, and give them all the rest of the day. But her spirits had been so long exerted that at present she felt unequal to move, and fit only for home, where she might be sure of being as silent as she chose. Promising to be with them the whole of the following morning, therefore, she closed the fatigues of the present by a toilsome walk to Camden Place, there to spend the evening chiefly in listening to the busy arrangements of Elizabeth and Mrs. Clay for the morrow's party, the frequent enumeration of the persons invited, and the continually improving detail of all the embellishments which were to make it the most completely elegant of its kind in Bath, while harassing herself in secret with the never-ending question of whether Captain Wentworth would come or not. They were reckoning him as certain, but with her it was a gnawing solicitude, never appeased for 5 minutes together. She generally thought he would come, because she generally thought he ought, but it was a case which she could not so shape into any positive act of duty or discretion, so inevitably to defy the suggestions of very opposite feelings. She only roused herself from the broodings of this restless agitation to let Mrs. Clay know that she had been seen with Mr. Elliot 3 hours after his supposed being out of Bath. For having watched in vain for some intimation of the interview from the lady herself, she determined to mention it, and it seemed to her that there was guilt in Mrs. Clay's face as she listened. It was transient, cleared away in an instant, but Anne could imagine she read there the consciousness of having, by some complication of mutual trick or some overbearing authority of his, been obliged to attend, perhaps for half an hour or so, his lectures and restrictions on her designs on Sir Walter. She exclaimed, however, with a very tolerable imitation of nature, "Oh dear, very true. Only think, Miss Elliot, to my great surprise, I met with Mr. Elliot in Bath Street. I was never more astonished. He turned back and walked with me to the pump yard. He had been prevented setting off for Thornbury, but I really forget by what, for I was in a hurry and could not much attend, and I can only answer for his being determined not to be delayed in his return. He wanted to know how early he might be admitted tomorrow. He was full of tomorrow, and it is very evident that I have been full of it too, ever since I entered the house, and learnt the extension of your plan, and all that had happened, or my seeing him could never have gone so entirely out of my head." One day only had passed since Anne's conversation with Mrs. Smith, but a keener interest had succeeded, and she was now so little touched by Mr. Elliot's conduct, except by its effects in one quarter, that it became a matter of course the next morning still to defer her explanatory visit in River Street. She had promised to be with the Musgroves from breakfast to dinner, Her faith was pledged, and Mr. Elliot's character, like the Sultaness Shahrazade's head, must live another day. She could not keep her appointment punctually, however. The weather was unfavorable, and she had grieved over the rain on her friend's account and felt it very much on her own before she was able to attend the walk. When she reached the White Hart and made her way to the proper appointment, she found herself neither arriving quite in time nor the first to arrive. The party before her were Mrs. Musgrove talking to Mrs. Croft, and Captain Harville to Captain Wentworth, and she immediately heard that Mary and Henrietta, too impatient to wait, had gone out the moment it had cleared, but would be back again soon, and that the strictest injunctions had been left with Mrs. Musgrove to keep her there till they returned. She had only to submit, sit down, be outwardly composed, and feel herself plunged at once in all the agitations which she had merely laid her account of tasting a little before the morning closed. There was no delay, no waste of time. She was deep in the happiness of such misery, or the misery of such happiness, instantly. 2 minutes after her entering the room, Captain Wentworth said, "We will write the letter we were talking of, Harville, now, if you will give me materials." Materials were all at hand on a separate table. He went to it, and nearly turning his back on them all, was engrossed by writing. Mrs. Musgrove was giving Mrs. Croft the history of her eldest daughter's engagement, and just in that inconvenient tone of voice, which was perfectly audible while it pretended to be a whisper, Anne felt that she did not belong to the conversation. And yet, as Captain Harville seemed thoughtful and not disposed to talk, she could not avoid hearing many undesirable particulars, such as how Mr. Musgrove and my brother Hayter had met again and again to talk it over, what my brother Hayter had said one day, and what Mr. Musgrove had proposed the next, and what had occurred to my sister Hayter, and what the young people had wished, and what I said at first I never could consent to, but was afterwards persuaded to think might do very well, and a great deal in the same style of open-hearted communication. Minutiae, which even with every advantage of taste and delicacy which good Mrs. Musgrove could not give, could be properly interesting only to the principals. Mrs. Croft was attending with great good humor, and whenever she spoke at all, it was very sensibly. Anne hoped the gentlemen might each be too much self-occupied to hear. "And so, madam, all these things considered," said Mrs. Musgrove in her powerful whisper, "though we could have wished it different, yet altogether we did not think it fair to stand out any longer, for Charles Hayter was quite wild about it, and Henrietta was pretty near as bad, and so we thought they had better marry at once and make the best of it, as many others have done before them. At any rate," said I, "it will be better than a long engagement." "Oh, dear Mrs. Croft, that is precisely what I was going to observe," cried Mrs. Croft. "I would rather have young people settle on a small income at once and have to struggle with a few difficulties together than be involved in a long engagement. I always think that "Oh, dear Mrs. Croft," cried Mrs. Musgrove, unable to let her finish her speech, "there is nothing I so abominate for young people as a long engagement. It is what I always protested against for my children. It is all very well, I used to say, for young people to be engaged if there is a certainty of their being able to marry in 6 months, or even in 12, but a long engagement." "Yes, dear ma'am," said Mrs. Croft, "or an uncertain engagement, an engagement which may be long. To begin without knowing that at such a time there will be the means of marrying, I hold to be very unsafe and unwise, and what I think all parents should prevent as far as they can." Anne found an unexpected interest here. She felt its application to herself, felt a nervous thrill all over her, and at the same moment that her eyes instinctively glanced toward the distant table, Captain Wentworth's pen ceased to move. His head was raised, pausing, listening, and he turned round the next instant to give a look, one quick, conscious look at her. The two ladies continued to talk, to re-urge the same admitted truths, and enforce them with such examples of the ill effect of a contrary practice as had fallen within their observation. But Anne heard nothing distinctly. It was only a buzz of words in her ear. Her mind was in confusion. Captain Harville, who had in truth been hearing none of it, now left his seat and moved to a window, and Anne, seeming to watch him, though it was from thorough absence of mind, became gradually sensible that he was inviting her to join him where he stood. He looked at her with a smile and a little motion of the head which expressed, "Come to me, I have something to say," and the unaffected, easy kindness of manner which denoted the feelings of an older acquaintance than he really was, strongly enforced the invitation. She roused herself and went to him. The window at which he stood, which was at the other end of the room from where the two ladies were sitting, and though nearer to Captain Wentworth's table, not very near. As she joined him, Captain Harville's countenance resumed the serious, thoughtful expression which seemed its natural character. "Look here," said he, unfolding a parcel in his hand and displaying a small miniature painting. "Do you know who that is?" "Certainly, Captain Benwick." "Yes, and you may guess who it is for. But it was not done for her, Miss Elliot. Do you remember our walking together at Lyme and grieving for him? I little thought then, but no matter. This was drawn at the Cape. He met with a clever young German artist at the Cape, and in compliance with a promise to my poor sister, sat to him and was bringing it home for her. And I have now the charge of getting it properly set for another. It was a commission to me, but who else was there to employ? I hope I can allow for him. I am not sorry indeed to make it over to another. He undertakes it, looking toward Captain Wentworth. He is writing about it now. And with a quivering lip, he wound up the whole by saying, Poor Fanny, she would not have forgotten him so soon. No, replied Anne in a low, feeling voice. That I can easily believe. It was not in her nature. She doted on him. It would not be in the nature of any woman who truly loved. Captain Harville smiled, as much as to say, do you claim that for your sex? And she answered the question, smiling also, yes. We certainly do not forget you as soon as you forget us. It is perhaps our fate rather than our merit. We cannot help ourselves. We live at home, quiet, confined, and our feelings prey upon us. You are forced on exertion. You have always a profession, pursuits, business of some sort or other to take you back into the world immediately, and continual occupation and change soon weaken impressions. Granting your assertion that the world does all this so soon for men, which, however, I do not think I shall grant, it does not apply to Benwick. He has not been forced upon any exertion. The peace turned him on shore at the very moment, and he has been living with us in our little family circle ever since. True, said Anne, very true. I did not recollect. But what shall we say now, Captain Harville? If the change be not from outward circumstances, it must be from within. It must be nature, man's nature, which has done the business for Captain Benwick. No, no, it is not man's nature. I will not allow it to be more man's nature than woman's, to be inconstant and forget those they do love or have loved. I believe the reverse. I believe in a true analogy between our bodily frames and our mental, and that as our bodies are the strongest, so are our feelings, capable of bearing most rough usage and riding out the heaviest weather. Your feelings may be the strongest, replied Anne, but the same spirit of analogy will authorize me to assert that ours are the most tender. Man is more robust than woman, but he is not longer lived, which exactly explains my view of the nature of their attachments. Nay, it would be too hard upon you if it were otherwise. You have difficulties and privations and dangers enough to struggle with. You are always laboring and toiling, exposed to every risk and hardship. Your home, country, friends, all quitted, neither time nor health nor life to be called your own. It would be too hard indeed, with a faltering voice, if woman's feelings were to be added to all this. We shall never agree upon this question, Captain Harville was beginning to say, when a slight noise called their attention to Captain Wentworth's hitherto perfectly quiet division of the room. It was nothing more than that his pen had fallen down, but Anne was startled at finding him nearer than she had supposed, and half inclined to suspect that the pen had only fallen because he had been preoccupied by them, striving to catch sounds which yet she did not think he could have caught. "Have you finished your letter?" said Captain Harville. "Not quite. A few lines more. I shall have done in 5 minutes." "There's no hurry on my side. I am only ready whenever you are. I am in very good anchorage here," smiling at Anne. "Well supplied and want for nothing. No hurry for a signal at all." "Well, Miss Elliot," lowering his voice, "as I was saying, we shall never agree, I suppose, upon this point. No man and woman would, probably. But let me observe that all histories are against you, all stories, prose and verse. If I had such a memory as Benwick, I could bring you 50 quotations in a moment on my side of the argument. And I do not think I ever opened a book in my life which had not something to say upon woman's inconstancy. Songs and proverbs all talk of woman's fickleness. But perhaps you will say, these were all written by men. Perhaps I shall. Yes, if you please. No reference to examples in books. Men have had every advantage of us in telling their own story. Education has been theirs in so much higher a degree. The pen has been in their hands. I will not allow books to prove anything. But how shall we prove anything? We never shall. We never can expect to prove anything upon such a point. It is a difference of opinion which does not admit of proof. We each begin, probably, with a little bias towards our own sex, and upon that bias build every circumstance in favor of it which has occurred within our own circle, many of which circumstances, perhaps those very cases which strike us the most, may be precisely such as cannot be brought forward without betraying confidence, or in some respect saying what should not be said. "Ah," cried Captain Harville, in a tone of strong feeling, "if I could but make you comprehend what a man suffers when he takes a last look at his wife and children and watches the boat that he has sent them off in, as long as it is in sight, and then turns away and says, God knows whether we ever meet again. And then, if I could convey to you the glow of his soul when he does see them again, when coming back after 12 months' absence, perhaps, and obliged to put into another port, he calculates how soon it be possible to get them there, pretending to deceive himself and saying they cannot be here till such a day, but all the while hoping for them 12 hours sooner, and seeing them arrive at last as if heaven had given them wings by many hours sooner still. If I could explain to you all this and all that a man can bear and do and glories to do for the sake of these treasures of his existence. I speak, you know, only of such men as have hearts, pressing his own with emotion. Oh, cried Anne eagerly, I hope to do justice to all that is felt by you and by those who resemble you. God forbid that I should undervalue the warm and faithful feelings of any of my fellow creatures. I should deserve utter contempt if I dared to suppose that true attachment and constancy were known only to women. No, I believe you capable of everything great and good in your married lives. I believe you equal to every important exertion and to every domestic forbearance, so long as, if I may be allowed the expression, so long as you have an object. I mean, while the woman you love lives, and lives for you. All the privilege I claim for my own sex, it is not a very enviable one, you need not covet it, is that of loving longest, when existence or when hope is gone. She could not immediately have uttered another sentence. Her heart was too full, her breath too much oppressed. You are a good soul, cried Captain Harville, putting his hand on her arm quite affectionately. There's no quarreling with you, and when I think of Benwick, my tongue is tied. Their attention was called towards the others. Mrs. Croft was taking leave. Here, Frederick, you and I part company, I believe, said she. I am going home, and you have an engagement with your friend. Tonight we may have the pleasure of all meeting again at your party, turning to Anne. We had your sister's card yesterday, and I understand Frederick had a card too, though I did not see it. And you are disengaged, Frederick, are you not, as well as ourselves? Captain Wentworth was folding up a letter in great haste, and either could not or would not answer fully. Yes, said he, very true. Here we separate, but Harville and I shall soon be after you. That is, Harville, if you are ready. I am in half a minute. I know you will not be sorry to be off. I am at your service in half a minute. Mrs. Croft left them, and Captain Wentworth, having sealed his letter with great rapidity, was indeed ready, and had even a hurried, agitated air, which showed impatience to be gone. Anne knew not how to understand it. She had the kindest "Good morning, God bless you," from Captain Harville, but from him, not a word, not a look. He had passed out of the room without a look. She had only time, however, to move closer to the table where he had been writing when footsteps were heard returning. The door opened. It was himself. He begged their pardon, but he had forgotten his gloves, and instantly crossing the room to the writing table and standing with his back towards Mrs. Musgrove, he drew out a letter from under the scattered paper, placed it before Anne with eyes of glowing entreaty fixed on her for a moment, and hastily collecting his gloves, was again out of the room, almost before Mrs. Musgrove was aware of his being in it. The work of an instant. The revolution which one instant had made in Anne was almost beyond expression. The letter, with the direction hardly legible to Miss A.E., was evidently the one which he had been folding so hastily. While supposing to be writing only to Captain Benwick, he had also been addressing her. On the contents of that letter depended all which this world could do for her. Anything was possible. Anything might be defied rather than suspense. Mrs. Musgrove had little arrangements of her own at her own table. To their protection she must trust, and sinking into the chair which he had occupied, succeeding to the very spot where he had leaned and written, her eyes devoured the following words. I can listen no longer in silence. I must speak to you by such means as are within my reach. You pierce my soul. I am half agony, half hope. Tell me not that I am too late, that such precious feelings are gone forever. I offer myself to you again with a heart even more your own than when you almost broke it 8 years and a half ago. Dare not say that man forgets sooner than woman, that his love has an earlier death. I have loved none but you. Unjust I may have been, weak and resentful I have been, but never inconstant. You alone have brought me to Bath. For you alone I think and plan. Have you not seen this? Can you fail to have understood my wishes? I had not waited even these 10 days could I have read your feelings as I think you must have penetrated mine. I can hardly write. I am every instant hearing something which overpowers me. You sink your voice, but I can distinguish the tones of that voice when they would be lost on others. Too good, too excellent creature, you do us justice indeed. You do believe that there is true attachment and constancy among men. Believe it to be most fervent, most undeviating in F.W. I must go, uncertain of my fate, but I shall return thither or follow your party as soon as possible. A word, a look, will be enough to decide whether I enter your father's house this evening or never. Such a letter was not to be soon recovered from. Half an hour's solitude and reflection might have tranquilized her, but the 10 minutes only, which now passed before she was interrupted, with all the restraints of her situation, could do nothing towards tranquility. Every moment rather brought fresh agitation. It was an overpowering happiness, and before she was beyond the first stage of full sensation, Charles, Mary, and Henrietta all came in. And that is part 12. I think it's part 12. I think it's part 12, yes, of Jane Austen's Persuasion. Whew, we're on absolutely the home stretch, and it's been a lovely journey, but come with me to the rest of it. And my dears, I will see you next Wednesday at 6 o'clock at Tales and Cocktails. I'm going to be so sad to say goodbye to this. It's been lovely reading this incredible, beautiful novel. But anyway, onward we go. See you next week at this time for Tales and Cocktails. Take care, be careful, be very aware of all the problems there are, COVID-wise, etc. And do take care of yourselves, my dears. I will see you next week. Bye now.